Thanks for joining me on this video. This is the video for the Where Your Heart Is, the spring section, and this is for the tree base. And what I have done here is I have my lightweight cutaway stabilizer that I put in the hoop. I just want you to take notice that the stabilizer that I had on hand was not quite wide enough, so I did take a thin piece of it and just zigzag the two sections together. And sometimes if you have one that's too big and you have a smaller hoop, just save those little pieces because they'll come in handy to save you a little bit of waste on your stabilizer. So our lightweight cutaway stabilizer is in the hoop, and the first step that I did, and I put it under the dark fabric so hopefully you can see it, but there's little tiny sections, and those are the tree base sections for the spring tree. So this is step one of the design of doing these sections, and this is the fabric that we're going to need in order to be able to complete the two sections. And so again, this is the trunk of the tree with the sky or background fabric behind it, and this is the base of the tree where the grass is. So let's get started with step number 2. So here's our step 1, where we have tacked down these two pieces of fabric for our tree trunk and the base of our tree. Our next step, or before we do our next step, we are going to trim this to 1/4 inch, scant 1/4 inch. We look like we're okay here, but since I have a little bit lighter fabric, I'm going to go a little bit narrower of a seam. It can be cut off now, or it can be cut off later after that seam is done. And the next step, which would be step number 3, is you're going to do a seam here to put the grass in here. Now we've taken a square of fabric and we've cut it into a triangle, so it could get a little confusing because we're stitching it on an angle. So what I would really suggest, in order for you to get it figured out, would be place it on here. You can see how this goes along there so that you know it's covered. And then tuck this under 1/4 inch and lay it against that seam, and then you can flip it over. And then it'll sew the seam there. Or if it makes more sense to you, you can just lay it like that and give it a test and go, nope, that's not it. Try it this way. Whichever way makes the most sense to you, but you do want to just double check and flip it over before you do this, sew the seam, so that you know that that whole section is being covered. So for step 3, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew the seam right there for this section. So here's our completed step 3. I've used just a neutral thread for that seam, and you can kind of see how that triangle is placed there. And then when you flip it over, you can just double check. We only need 1/4 inch here because it's going to be a seam against this one when we actually do our block. But our entire section here has been adequately covered. And now for step 4, we're going to do the same thing for the seam over here on that side. Here's our seam for step 4, and let's just make sure we have everything covered, and it looks like it's going to be adequately covered. And then for our next step, step 5, we're going to add the piece here. Step 6 will be adding the next section right here. Here's completed step 5, sewing the seam with neutral thread. We'll flip that out of the way so we can then do step number, I believe it's 6. And we'll lay the same size and color piece of fabric there, and the machine will sew a seam with the neutral thread. Here's our completed step 6, and then we're going to flip and finger press, and just give all of them, make sure you're on a firm surface, a good finger press. Because what will happen next is we're going to put water-soluble thread in the needle. We still have our embroidery bobbin thread in the bobbin, and it's going to sew a tack down stitch around all those little loose pieces of fabric that are on. Okay, I'm just trimming up a couple of jump threads that have accumulated on the back just to clean it up a little bit. And we've done with our water-soluble thread we have placed, done our tack downs for all those sections. The only thing left is something kind of fun here, and that is, have you ever carved your initials inside of a heart on a tree? And that's what we're going to do with this section right here. You can make it look natural by, you know, whether it be a tan color or a lighter brown color for the tree, or you can make it stand out with a red heart if you really want it to show up. And I haven't decided yet, so let me take it to the machine and make my decision, and we'll be right back. So here are our completed spring tree trunk sections, and you can see I just chose a tan color. So you guys probably thought I'd go hot pink or something, but I decided to go with a subtle tan color for the engraved heart on the tree. So now I'm going to move to the cutting table, and we're going to show you how to trim these in preparation to make the spring tree. Okay, so now we can get busy trimming our blocks. I have my trimmer by George here, and this is of course our tool that has the thin metal edge to help getting right up close to where the basting stitch line is. There's this two school of thoughts on this. You can trim all of it through all the layers since it's just a thin cutaway. It may not matter. Personally, I like to trim it using the trimmer by George with the metal end so I can get that stabilizer right up to the basting stitch. And by doing that, I think it just leaves a little less bulk in the seams. But that's just my personal preference. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around each of these sections. And again, if you don't want to use that side, right now you would just trim a 1/2 inch right there where we have it marked 1/2 inch through all layers. But I'm going to use the trimmer by George in order to get rid of the stabilizer. Okay, so that's gone. I'm going to also do it on this one. First thing I'm going to do is, so that you don't forget, because you're trimming off where you just marked, is I'm going to go ahead and trim this to my 1/2 inch. Okay, and then I'm going to, since this is how it's positioned, I'll just go ahead and this is eventually going to have the fabric on the front trimmed 1/4 inch. But let's get rid of that stabilizer first. Okay, and then we can flip our ruler over, and this will be cut to 1/4 inch. And then let's just do the long sides over here. I'm going to repeat the same process. Using the trimmer by George. Snug that metal edge right in there. And this is 1/4 inch here. Whoops, it flipped over on me. So line the 1/4 inch mark up with the basting stitch and trim that a 1/4 inch. And then let's finish this completed side. The short ends are going to be 1/2 inch. And again, I'm just going to get rid of the stabilizer. We don't need that extra layer in there. And we're right about 1/2 inch there anyway, and we should be on this side too, so let's just get rid of the stabilizer. You can actually leave those a little longer, and they can get trimmed up at the same time the entire block gets trimmed up. So we'll put that aside. And this is the base of the tree trunk, and this section I'm going to remove the stabilizer and then trim the fabric back 1/4 inch. So just flip the trimmer 2.0 over, line up our ruler with the 1/4 inch mark right on the basting stitch, and trim it up. And again here, just like I said in the other piece, we could trim this fabric to 1/2 inch, but we don't have to because it will be trimmed again once this piece is joined along with the rest of the block. So it doesn't matter if you trim it or you don't trim it. I'll leave one side trimmed and one side not trimmed. We'll keep everybody happy. And then saying goodbye to the stabilizer. So here is the base of our tree. And here is the tree trunk. And they will get stitched together into the spring tree block, which we're going to work on now.